All right, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Worst First here on hoopslounge.com with myself, Phil, and Mr. Justin. We have the third best team in the West for the regular season. We have the San Antonio Spurs. A lot of people may agree or disagree with this pick because they're really hyped right now, but we're trying to put this on an even keel. With a key additions of LaMarcus Aldridge, big time, David West, Jimmer Fredette, and Ray McCollum. And key losses of Canadian sensation Corey Joseph, big man Thiago Splitter, and Marco Bellinelli. They gained LaMarcus Aldridge. Justin, they have Duncan, Aldridge, and Kawhi Leonard. How is this not the best team in the West?
Again, this is a team that I think everyone should be scared of, that are a legitimate threat to win it all. When I look at the Spurs, there are some legitimate concerns that I do have. Tony Parker's hamstring injury last year was pretty significant and a big part of why they lost to the Clippers. And watching him play in Euro basketball, it looks like it's gotten worse. He was having a lot of trouble turning corners, getting around guys, finishing at the rim. He didn't have any lift when he was doing his layups. So there's a lot of concerns there. And the other concern I have is with them losing so many big men. I mean, they lost Thiago Splitter, their starting center. They lost Aaron Baines, who was their backup. Tim Duncan's going to be playing center. LaMarcus Aldridge has come out and said that he has no interest in playing center. He canceled meetings with any teams that said that they wanted him to play center. David West is too short to play center, and he's kind of regressed defensively the last couple of years. He's not quite the same player that he used to be. So when you have Duncan close to 40 as your only center, and he traditionally has needed to rest games, you worry about just him getting old, him needing rest, and who they're going to put in at those times. So with the lack of depth there, with regression from Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, Tim Duncan getting older, even with LaMarcus Aldridge being there, I just think they aren't as deep as a team, and for that reason, I had them falling a little bit.
No, I can see that, which quintessentially makes them like a playoff darling, right? Because they're going to make all these guys sit lower minutes just to keep it going. But
Exactly.
But it does kind of bring up the point that this can't be a finished product. I mean, you can't say that Duncan and Aldridge are your only real bigs. I mean, there has to be someone out there in the future, and maybe we don't know the name right now, but you would have to think that they'll be fairly active in the free agent or trade market for a backup big. I mean, because with what you just described, that's not a sustainable model in my mind, your mind, and most. And, you know, they're Buford and co have done such a good job that it's like, why would you risk the whole season on a lack of point guard play? And I actually think that, you know what, I agree with you there. Maybe let's focus on the backcourt, because the backcourt is where I think, while they do have their issues there with Parker, I think there is something to be had. I think Jimmer Fredette and Ray McCollum are a little bit underrated. I think this is going to be actually a really good situation for Fredette. Look, as always with him, temper expectations. I'm not saying he's going to be a starter. I'm not saying he's going to be any of this, but you know, a guy who comes off the bench 5, 10, maybe 15 minutes, hits some open shots, because you're going to have a ton of open shots with Tim Duncan and Aldridge commanding all that attention, plus Kawhi Leonard developing as a star in the league. Him and Ray McCollum have shown that when they can hit their open shots, they can score. I actually really like Ray McCollum as a change of pace guard off the bench. He was a bit underrated there in Sacramento, and I think he has the chance, depending on, you know, how old Parker looks at the end, to be playing very significant, if not starter minutes for the San Antonio team. He's got some decent size, and they'll need him to step up, because I think losing Corey Joseph, I mean, everyone's talking about, you know, he's gone home, he's in Toronto, it's a great situation, and I think it is. But I think he'll be more of a loss to that team than people give it credit for. Like I don't think San Antonio could have just let him go and not tried to pick up at least a guy like McCollum, because he was a bit intangible. He hits threes, he plays D. I mean, on a team like that, it's kind of perfect. And Thiago Splitter, look, everyone who's been following Hoops Lounge, or me specifically, have known I've never been his biggest fan, but he's an efficient guy, and he's gone to Atlanta. He was one of those bigs they had to trade away to clear out the space for LaMarcus. and Marco Bellinelli, who I think, again, underrated because it is another ball handler, right? Maybe not full time, but he's a guy that when you had him and Parker and Joseph and Manu, you had guys in the backcourt who could handle and take care of things. Like I remember last year, one of my favorite lineups didn't include Tony Parker. It actually had Manu bringing up the ball and initiating the offense. Maybe I'm off by that one, but is this one of those teams that, I don't know, do you think they were better last year than this year? And I know that's weird to say, right? Because you've just added LaMarcus Aldridge, but given who they had and who they have, and given health, are they just for sure better this year, or is that a question?
I think it's a question. One guy you are forgetting when you're talking about the backcourt is someone that I'm a big fan of, and that's Patty Mills. I mean, he's a legitimate microwave scorer. Not exactly a traditional point guard the same way that Tony Parker is or Corey Joseph, but he was the de facto backup to Tony Parker for all those years, and Manu would be the primary initiator off the bench. So I think they're going to need to lean on that a little bit more, but my concerns were going down to depth. I think there is a chance that they were a better team last year. I really do have some concerns, well, obviously with the lack of depth at center, but also the fit of LaMarcus Aldridge. I mean, LaMarcus Aldridge is a guy that has traditionally, each year he keeps moving, his game keeps moving further and further away from the basket and into mid-range. He doesn't necessarily finish efficiently or very efficiently anywhere on the court. He does have average efficiency basically everywhere, but he was a workhorse. He's someone that makes a team and an offense a lot better because he shoulders such an extreme load, and only someone as talented as him would be capable of doing that. In Portland, that opened things up for Damian Lillard, Wes Matthews, Nick Batum. So I'm not criticizing LaMarcus Aldridge. It's just a different style than what the Spurs have traditionally had, which was someone that you plug into a system, they either get their buckets close to the rim or from the three-point line. So they're going to have to make a lot of changes to accommodate him and kind of feed him in those mid-range spots. He's excellent from the high post. There's just a lot of changes here, and it's going away from what the Spurs have traditionally been. So for that reason, because they're getting older, because I have concerns about Tony Parker, the lack of depth after all the guys they've missed, I think there is a chance that they were better last year, prior to the injuries, of course. The one final thing I'll add, I think there's a pretty good chance that Jimmer Fredette is cut by the time this video even posts. I don't think that he is going to be someone that makes the starting.
Just being hopeful.
I don't see him making the opening night lineup, but we'll see. He was successful for a reason, but I just don't see that translate into the NBA.
No, I can see you that way, and especially with Mills and McCollum, is the need for that extra guard really there, especially with Parker. He'd be the fourth guard. Maybe you play him at the two, but again, you have other depth with Green and such. Now, here's perhaps a bit of an interesting question, because I thought about this. When LaMarcus was coming to town, you also had, or have, Kawhi Leonard, ascending in the ranks of NBA greatness. Mm-hmm. Who A, leads the team in scoring this year, and who B, is their best player this year?
I say LaMarcus probably leads the team in scoring. I kind of peg him in 18, 19 points per game. I think this might be the year that Kawhi Leonard takes over as their best player. It has been Duncan for a ridiculously long time, and it still might be Duncan. I mean, he is still a fantastic two-way player, and his game just never drops off. I don't think LaMarcus Aldridge is going to be their best player. I talked about kind of the concerns with how he's going to fit within the offense. He's also a very poor defensive player, and his rim protection numbers have been awful. So given Kawhi and Duncan being two-way players, I'm going to give the nod to them, and I think this is the year that Leonard really does break through. He was kind of on that trajectory last year. He had a couple setbacks, wasn't very good in the playoffs outside the first few games. I think the Spurs, after the first 3 games against the Clippers, I think they were minus 20 with Kawhi on the floor for the last 4, which just seems weird given how productive he was. But it might be something to look at, even though it is small sample size. So I think this is the year Kawhi takes over, but LaMarcus probably is going to be their leading scorer just because they're going to feature him as kind of their star free agent acquisition.
Absolutely. And as a closing idea, I feel this whole Kawhi Leonard story just has to be this feel-good story. I mean, I remember when he came through the draft, people were saying, he's a undersized 4, couldn't really play the 3, and then just put that work ethic in. So many videos, had huge hands, obviously, but he's just one of these guys that kind of figured out, okay, how am I going to figure out my way into the NBA? I think we'd be talking about him in a completely different light had he stayed in Indiana. I think it was such a fortuitous thing that he was traded for Hill on draft day, and he just kind of figured out, I'll be a defensive guy because what I do, I'll learn to shoot the 3, I'll be a 3-and-D guy, and then I'll let everything flesh out. Like, I kind of wonder why more players don't take that approach, because when you look in the NBA, 3-and-D guys are almost the most sought after, and you see guys going other ways. Like, if I was someone who didn't have an elite skill, and we saw that with other guys like JJ Redick is still an elite 3-point shooter. So what do you learn? What do you work on more than anything? Yeah, he's a better dribbler now, but his defense, I think he's a bit of an underrated defender. Guys like that. I think Kawhi Leonard is one of those players that people sleep on because he kind of does a lot of those little things, and he may not have like the sexy appeal of a LeBron James or someone else, but he's that guy that you never worry about, and I love players like that.
Did you say he's underrated as a defender?
No. Not as a defender, as like those sexy basketball players in terms of dunks and highlight plays and things like that. Like Kawhi is more of a meat and potatoes kind of guy, but he's one of those guys that I love because you don't have to worry about his ego. You don't have to worry about him fitting with someone. You don't have to worry about him. You can play him as a undersized 4. He can pick up a 2. He's just, his versatility, his work ethic, and everything. Like, do you think he has the ability? Because I've had this conversation with Mark from Hoops Lounge and other people. Do you think he's a superstar in the making, or he's a star in the making?
I think he's a star in the making. I think he really is a fantastic player. The thing with Leonard, I think if he's drafted by another team, like if he was drafted by Indiana, the reason you don't see players develop like this, not every organization is as good as the Spurs. He wasn't asked to do a ton recently. If he was drafted really highly and he's basically one of the only competent players on an NBA team, which is often the case when you are drafted in the top 5-6 spots. Like, let's say he was drafted to the Cavaliers, for example. Just a mess of an organization. They'd ask him to do too much right off the bat, so he sticks with what his strengths are, which would be playing in transition, slashing, attacking the basket. He had a broken jump shot. He might not have the time to actually develop the jump shot. He might not have the right coaching staff around. He was in a reduced role. They were very careful with him. They brought him around. They reconstructed his jump shot. He didn't have to do more than what he was capable of doing at that time. And as a result of that, they were able to develop him. I think he is a star in the making. I don't see him getting to Kevin Durant, LeBron James, Anthony Davis level. But I think that he can be a better Paul George. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing to be. I think he can be very close to your number one guy. I think him and LaMarcus Aldridge moving forward is going to be a very good tandem and gives the Spurs a future.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's funny, as you were describing Leonard in the situation, I was thinking of his exact opposite. I know it sounds strange, but Thomas Robinson. Like, I thought of him, how he came in and he just kind of had to play to his gritty, undersized power forward strengths, and he was never allowed to expand on that. And he's been booting around the league. Like, I think, obviously they're different players, but I think it's kind of a testament to that right fit for the right draft pick. And, had Thomas Robinson not been picked, 5th overall by Sacramento,
Mm-hmm.
You know, if he had gone to an organization where he could just mature and be that big off the bench and then learn to shoot a three, become a stretch four longer, like, you know, there's issues like this which make or break careers, and I think this is one of the things that San Antonio doesn't get enough credit for. And even though it is spoken about, the culture is one thing, but the development is another. They've been able, year after year, to maximize guys who other teams have failed on. I mean, Danny Green has not been a Spur his whole life. He's had his best years as a Spur. You know, it's the same with other players. Like, they just seem to have that culture that they understand if you fit their system, and they will maximize you. And I feel that that's a very underrated part of this franchise. And as much as, you know, Tim Duncan's one of the best players ever, Tony Parker has played very well for years, LaMarcus Aldridge is great, and Greg Popovich is one of the best interviews in basketball. I just think really that the aura of the Spur is what really propels them more than anything else.
I think when you have cornerstone pieces both on the court and in the front office and in the training staff and in your coaching staff, I think that goes a long way to maximizing the players you have. Danny Green's a funny example. I mean, there's a guy drafted in the second round by the Cavaliers. They cut him. He goes to the Spurs. The Spurs actually cut him, and then they bring him back later. I mean, sometimes it just takes guys longer to develop than others. Sometimes you just need to be in that right situation. And I guess he wasn't in the right situation the first time, or the Spurs weren't in the right place to accept him the first time he came there. And eventually that changed. So it's a testament to the Spurs that they continuously find new ways to improve, new ways to reinvent themselves. They go from an all-defense team to one of the best offensive teams in the NBA. They play to their skill set, and Popovich isn't a one-trick pony. He doesn't have his one signature system. He looks at the talent that's available. He maximizes that talent and builds a roster and an offense that's going to bring out the best while hiding whatever warts they do have. So for all the concerns I have about the lack of a center, who LaMarcus Aldridge has been in the past, the foundation that they have there is why I'm still confident that this is going to be a contender this year. This is a team that is potentially going to go to the NBA Finals. They're going to figure it out. I don't know what the ceiling is. I don't know what that is going to look like, but I have confidence that the Spurs are going to be able to figure this out.
Absolutely. Well, listen, guys, I want to know what you guys think. Spurs number 3 in our Western Conference preview. Let us know in the comments below. Please remember to like and share. And from Justin and myself, thanks for joining us another episode here on hoopslounge.com.